we are now at that brink where you're going to hear Hugo say 2024 is the year we're shipping everything. So everything will be shipped this year that'll bring Flare Network together.
I want absolutely everything, things we want to build. I want all of that shipped, pretty much way before the end of the year, because I want the whole functionality of Flare to expand, and I want it to realize, I want to be able to realize the potential of what Flare offers to the development community and to community, token holders and ecosystem participants.
Welcome to the DeFi Standard, and this is Mickey B. Fresh.
This is the first product that we've started as HT Digital Assets, which is the tokenization platform of Hex Trust. And there's a reason that we chose Flare as the first place to start. We view them as a key partner, and really HT Digital Assets, we're looking to really start proper tokenization of real world assets in all shapes and forms, right? And the deployment of FAssets on Flare, we're very, very optimistic on. This is just the beginning of the relationship. There's going to be much more to come.
So ClearPool has officially launched the T-Pool for Hex Trust's new stablecoin USDX on the Flare network. And this new product offers a simple and straightforward way to earn USDX yields plus extra FLR rewards. So the T-Pool is custom built for the Flare network's first natively issued stablecoin. And there's some unique features in this three-way collaboration. And throughout the video, we're going to mix in some video clips from the recent ecosystem call between Hugo Filion of Flare Labs, ClearPool Finance, and Hex Trust's subsidiary HT Digital Assets, who's the issuer of USDX. And USDX is a yield-bearing stablecoin, but it does not simply earn yield by just holding USDX. You have to stake USDX in the Clear Finance T-Pool on the Flare network, and you receive a claim token. And this is reminiscent of almost all DeFi applications. So it's something you need to get familiar with no matter what the application is, from FAssets to liquidity pools to lending and borrowing protocols to liquid staking. They all come with claim tokens. So having a base foundational understanding of DeFi and decentralized finance's core primitives will help significantly with understanding how these different mechanisms work that are going to be slightly different in different assets and different applications and uses. So that is something everyone needs to do on their own. But ClearPool Finance is a private credit decentralized finance application that users, anyone, because this is DeFi, anyone can access. And when I say that, it means anyone can access. It's possible that certain jurisdictions, some people might have to use a VPN, but everyone can access. And anyone can acquire USDX from any DEX on the Flare network. And you don't have to go to Hex Trust to mint USDX, just like you don't go to Circle to mint USDC or Tether, and you won't have to go to Ripple to mint their RL USD stablecoin. That's kind of the beauty of how this is developing, that these stablecoins, once they're out there, they're going to be out in the wild. And for at least the short term, they are a significant source of adoption for building a DeFi ecosystem and a robust economy on these layer one networks. This is a proven fact, and Hugo's echoing the same things that David Schwartz is. And for all of you who maybe have ignored DeFi or have thought, oh, that's not going to affect XRP or Flare, they're for data, they're for liquidity. Well, wake up. It's at the center of both. And that is why I named this channel the DeFi Standard. Now, USDX is going to earn 4% USDX in real time and claimable at any time with no lockups. As you hold cUSDX, your USDX is staked in the T-Pool vault. But what the beauty of DeFi is composability and the ability to utilize that cUSDX, the claim token that's a receipt to get back your initial USDX, is usable as collateral. And this is very important for the FAssets system. And we're going to listen to Hugo explain why this has profound impacts on the FAssets system.
But really, the most exciting thing for me is cUSDX is use in something we call the FAsset protocol. Now, the FAsset protocol kind of removes that need to trust the person signing the transaction across chains. It does that effectively by making that person have an awful lot to lose if they don't do their job properly. And that what they have to lose is the collateral they've put in the vault. And in the FAsset system, that proportion of assets is split between a stablecoin or a stablecoin claim receipt like cUSDX and native, so Flare. So the two assets that are securing that transaction across chain and retaining the value of the bridged Bitcoin or XRP, the collateral underpinning the value of that token when it's on Flare, or indeed bridged from Flare to another chain, is a combination of stables and Flare native. And it'll probably start out somewhere around 2x over collateralized. The problem with over collateralization, especially when it comes to stablecoins. So if you think about the collateral that you're holding with Flare, the collateral component that is Flare within the vault, that yields because you can delegate that. You can delegate that to FTSO provider. And so that means you can get yield on that. What we haven't been able to do is, until now, find yield on USDT, USDC, because there haven't been protocols that enable you to do what you're doing with ClearPool and get that treasury yield. So now, with the use of USDX and cUSDX, it means that the collateral that will sit under the FAssets can be fully yielding, both the Flare and the stable coins. This has some really amazing effects. It means that we're far more likely to get more collateral in the system, enabling the creation of more units of FAsset. It also means that the bridge fees should be lower because there's less need for very, very high bridge fees. So when you mint and redeem your token, you pay a fee. And when you use the token on Flare, a very, very small transaction fee goes to the collateral providers because the system must remain secure. And the only way it can remain secure is by incentivizing the collateral providers to keep their collateral there. So by bringing cUSDX in as collateral, it really resolves one of my biggest fears for the F assets was that it was too capital inefficient, because it allows a person with collateral to be fully yielding at all times and collect the mint fees and collect the redeem fees and collect the trail transaction fees. One of the cool things it also means is that actually the collateral in the system is increasing, because if you start with 100, at the end of the year you have 108. So it means that your collateral is naturally increasing, which makes the system safer, which is very, very desirable for me. It also should reduce the actual cost of bridging, because it means that the collateral providers in the F asset system do not have to charge as high fees in order to get the same sort of, all markets have a balancing point between supply and demand. And all collateral providers will, be looking at, okay, where can I provide collateral? I can provide collateral on these 8 chains. Where is the best risk-adjusted return? And this makes the risk-adjusted return substantially more desirable. So for me, that's the most exciting thing. But of course, there's huge amounts of things that it can be used in DeFi. I like the idea of lending dollars, whilst at the same time getting yield on those dollars. It's a very interesting possibility.
And the two collaterals that back the F assets, besides the initial underlying asset, which there will be some, is FLR on Flare and Songbird on the Songbird network, but also a stable coin. Flare is yield bearing because you could delegate and still provide as collateral. And the stable coin, if you use USDC or USDT, it sits there idle and it earns the agents nothing. It's just risk and nothing. And USDX, in the form of cUSDX, provides 8% APY that's claimable by the agents at any time, so they could keep compounding it, and it's APR. So compounded, it's probably even higher. And currently, I believe it's 8.16% APR. And before we go to the Hugo video, there's going to be a few questions that are going to be, I just would like to answer. Where does the FLR come from that's being paid in yield? Well, according to ClearPool Finance, it's a grant from the Flare Foundation for at least 12 months worth of yield. Where does the USDX yield come from? Well, it comes from actual US short-term treasuries, which is the most liquid market in the world. Who is Hex Trust? Hex Trust is Ripple invested in 2 funding rounds. They participated in the Hong Kong pilot with Ripple as the custodian. They also were one of the first institutional FTSOs on the Flare network. They are Flare Labs' custodian, and they are one of the biggest digital asset custodians in Asia. And they have a very high reputation based out of Hong Kong, where they're licensed, and also in Dubai, where they just acquired the VARA license. And this is their first issuance of a stablecoin, and they chose the Flare network for a reason. And that reason being is that there will be continuous demand for USDX due to the fact that the F asset system, as more F assets are minted, which will be predominantly FXRP and FBTC. I mean, that's just the truth. We're not going to have 20 F assets. Maybe Doge, maybe Litecoin, but FXRP and FBTC are the predominant assets that'll be minted, because they're the two that right now you really can't do much in a true EVM smart contract way. Now, there will be additional ways you could use XRP in the near future, the EVM sidechain, and Futureverse, and on the XRPL mainnet. But FXRP is a unique proposition because you get the access to a trustless bridge to Flare's ecosystem. And we are able to either be a minter or you could be a collateral provider.
Being able to get this yield on a stablecoin, as opposed to the previous position that the industry was in, which is where you can't get the yield, and the yield is pocketed by the stablecoin issuer. I mean, there are reasons that people have wanted to create a lot of stablecoins which don't have yield. It's been incredibly lucrative, especially as interest rates have gone up. But fundamentally, for the FAsset protocol, it's a total breakthrough, because it means that it just makes the system way more attractive for people to lock collateral in, and that's what you want when you're trying to create a collateralized bridge.
But everyone needs to understand that it's complicated, and it's going to take more than asking a few questions on Twitter to understand something. Just a heads up, because I see this a lot on Twitter, and you wouldn't even, some of the questions asked, it's just like, read the documentation. I mean, if you have to have it speak to you in audio, that's what you're going to have to do to understand this stuff. There is no shortcuts. There's no room for being intellectual lazy. That's why there's a beta, and it's going to last for a while. So yes, it helps Flare test the system and test the beta on Costin, which will be incentivized, and then Songbird, and then over to Flare, and it'll be retroactive with details to come. But you should be participating because you want to understand how all the mechanics work, and there's no time frame. It's the first of its kind. This has never been built before. So having this piece that was missing makes it more capital efficient. As you heard Hugo say, this will lower the fees that agents will charge even. And they added trailing transaction fees as well, which I think is important because that's nominal to the FAsset user on the Flare network. But as that FAsset's used and traded in dApps and on DEXs and moved around more, those come back to the collateral providers who are depositing FLR. And this is what drives an economy. And there's two clips. This is something that I've been saying for a while now, is these layer one networks are economies, and they need to have economic models. And the Flare network has the FAsset system is its economic machine at the center. It's not staking. That's a component, and it helps secure the network. And it ultimately, more importantly, it helps secure the data provisioning protocols, which are unique to Flare, and its security model has unique economic design that other networks do not have. And I'll let Hugo explain that to you in this video clip.
And I think fundamentally, one of the questions I've always been asked is, okay, well, why aren't you just focusing on data? Well, because if you're just focusing on data, and the fundamental thing you need is economic security, then you have to have a usable layer one as well, because otherwise your economic security becomes wrapped up with your only use case, which is data. Flare's only use case is not data. Flare's primary use case is data. But Flare is also a layer one, which will have an ecosystem. That ecosystem adds value to Flare. That value in turn secures the data protocols, and the data protocols make Flare more useful. There's somewhat of a virtuous circle there. Whereas were we to only focus on data and not focus on building a layer one ecosystem, we you have a horrible circularity, which is your economic security is X. If your economic security falls, your ability to attest data accurately, safely falls, and you get this sort of lunar-like cycle. There's the opposite. It's both a data protocol and a layer 1 protocol. So it has this perhaps more virtuous circle. As the project, the team, the execution of Flare has matured, it's become very apparent that, and as the space is maturing, I think I'm fundamentally more and more convinced in Flare's mission to adequately bring data into the blockchain ecosystem. I think the more we look at it, the more I think about it, the more I have analysts go away and really dig into every protocol out there. There's just nothing else that is being built with a fundamental focus on economic security. If you're looking for data protocols, there's really nothing else that has. We have close to $1 billion staked in our validators. No one else comes close in terms of the amount of value that is essentially at risk if the data protocol goes wrong. And that's what you want. You want the highest level of economic security for data, for being able to get attestations from other blockchains, for being able to get attestations from Web 2. So fundamentally, nothing's changed. And perhaps, now even more certain that we're on the right path rather than, I was maybe 2 years ago even. Fundamentally, I look at the technology that people are building, and everything they build that is fancy and exciting and it gets a lot of hype. Ultimately, it all comes back down to economic security. And I think Flare can play very, very nicely with a lot of other blockchains in terms of providing data. I think Flare can play very, very nicely with bridging services in terms of providing proofs of attestations from other blockchains to help other bridges secure themselves better. So being able to update each price every block. That is an amazing thing. Each block is about 2.1 seconds. So we can basically update 1,000 prices every 2.1 seconds. It puts Flare on practically the leading edge of, oracles, certainly with the amount of safety that Flare has. One of the things I kind of really think about Flare is, we're building a network for data, fundamentally for data. It's EVM layer 1. The idea being that data plus compute gives you something interesting, gives you something valuable. And that network is secured by the value of the token, by the token that is staked. And hence the protocols such as the FTSO and the FTC are more secure. The more successful the network is, the higher the value of the staked token. And really, we're the only people doing this. We're the only people really trying to apply full economic security to data protocols and to bridging.
And intrinsic value of these networks, and everyone's like, talks about, oh, these assets going to be backed by something. Stop thinking like that. It is the wrong way. They are networks. They are network economies with native protocols, and they're polymorphic assets, meaning they have the characteristics and features of a startup, a security, commodity, a currency, a dividend paying equity, a money market fund, a bond. They have all these different character traits, and they have some of a Web 2 platform and a network economy and a marketplace. So look at the XRP ledger. It's a decentralized exchange and a payment network natively. And ultimately the market will value based on the fundamentals of that asset. But at the same time, it's unique because the asset itself that's native to it has a supply, and there's a deflationary aspect to most supplies in the long run with these tokens because there's a finite amount of them. Now with Flare, there's a slight inflation rate that's scaling downward, and we're in a distribution period right now. But at the end of that distribution period, the inflation rate will be under 5%, and the goal is to drive revenue. Like any economy, what does an economy need to do? It needs to drive economic value. And you do that, we don't have a labor force and work, but we have a resource. And that Flare Network's resource is data. So relaying that data from the FTSO to other networks drives real revenue from the outside. And that goes back to the infrastructure providers who pass it back to their delegators, which is ultimately the Flare token holders.
Within that, the Flare Systems protocol is the first step to enabling the ability to relay Flare's data to other blockchains. So the FTSO, relaying FTSO data, or relaying state data from the Flare data connector, and relaying Web2 data. So that gets you, that means that Flare can act as an oracle and a general message passing service on any chain, it's connected to. And again, that should be done such that there are additional revenues for validators from providing that data on other chains. Those revenues can then also be passed on by the validators to stakers or delegators, depending on which system is being used. And that's very exciting that Flare can turn from just an isolated network itself to basically being a service provider to other chains and having a true business model. So I'm very excited for that. So that's sort of embedded in the Flare Systems protocol.
So this is where this is going, and Flare is set up to have that built in, because ultimately transaction fees are not going to cut it. Like the way Ethereum charges high transaction fees to pay for the stakers' rewards might work now, but in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that's a hindrance to the network adoption. Where Flare and the XRP ledger, they burn the fees that are transaction fees and gas fees. And they found other sources of revenue. There's a lot of similarities between the two, even though they're very different in many ways. They both have a concept of native core protocols, in that the XRP ledger is building in the AMM, the lending protocol. It already has the DEX order book. It has the pathfinding and programmable payment execution engine with pathfinding and auto bridging, and the order book DEX that's built into the network and integrated with the automated market makers' liquidity pools and trust lines, and integrated with the account system. And new amendments can be added, and they're core, unique to the XRP ledger. They're not smart contract dApps, which could span across 10 other blockchains in the same way. And Flare's data protocols are based on, pre-compiled native smart contracts. They're a little different, but they don't cost anything to anybody. They're built in and they work together. They manage the supply. That's why there's on-chain governance with Flare. You vote on-chain. And very few layer 1 networks are able to do that. And the FTSO system has taken time to decentralize, and now we're at V2. And then there's the staking and the state connector, which is a data connector and the web connector. So the data connector is basically the web connector, which is Web 2, and the state connector, which is Web 3 data, state from other blockchains. And that's going to allow the relayer to relay prices, which is the median price feed, to other networks, because it can attest and verify that that is the median price feed. You can't just relay data and then the other networks just trust that, oh, that's the price. Okay. The state connector is the eye in the sky that could not just attest, but it could cryptographically prove that the median price that came out of the FTSO is what was relayed for that particular price feed. And this is going to be able to scale. So Flare is built to scale on an institutional level. So USDX provides this base yield. And the XRP community is still catching up with certain concepts of DeFi. But a stablecoin should be known. Anyone who's played around in DeFi knows that that's critical to the enablement of a robust DeFi ecosystem. Obviously, everything is priced in dollars. So you therefore need dollars in on-chain construct, right? So, oh, I want my asset to go up in price. Well, what is it going to go up in price in? Dollars. So obviously you need stablecoin. So just the concept that people would still to this day are still not able to comprehend this. It means that we got a ways to go with the education XRP community. And a lot of the Flare community is made up of XRP community. Not everybody, but there's a sense here that in Flare that we knew the DeFi ecosystem's coming. We know the FAssets in itself is a DeFi protocol. We knew we were going to be able to participate. We know we could earn yield. We know that data is, we understand the value proposition because it's been built from the beginning like this. And yes, it's evolved and changed, but there's still similarities of every L1. And you could see the parallels. Both native stablecoin. They're not that different from each other. And USDX natively itself, it doesn't earn yield. It needs to go into the collaboration with the DeFi dApp, which is the credit marketplace, ClearPool, to get that yield. So users will connect you'll copy and paste the official ClearPool T-Pool Vault link into your Bifrost browser. And then it will open it and the dApp will come up. Not everything is going to be a native function inside of a wallet. You don't want that because you want to have the full interface of an application. Some network features like staking, delegating, governance, voting, other things might be available in Bifrost, but the actual smart contract applications are not going to be inside the wallet. The wallet is so it could sign and authorize transactions from your Flare account. And some assets, once you stake them, they don't show in your wallet anymore. But you still own them and have access to them. But understanding, well, how do I get that back? Well, it's a claim token. So just understanding these concepts, there is a ton of resources, but people need to just know that they have to do the research to understand, okay, I'm going to have to learn about DeFi. That's where this is going. And we're going to listen now to Hugo and the guy from Hex Trust talk about how real world asset tokenization is the biggest trend right now in crypto.
First of all, real world asset protocols have been very, very successful and are getting more and more successful. So having that on Flare as one of the first places that it exists is incredibly, interesting. As soon as then there are bridges to Flare, whether it be via FAssets or otherwise, it means that people could start, give you an example. We could bring Bitcoin to ClearPool. I don't know if Bitcoin is currently being used in ClearPool on other chains, but suddenly people could start lending effectively in Bitcoin or XRP to other people that need it, or are happy to take the price risk. So that's a good example. But if you look at the there's cUSDX, which is the treasury yielding version of the stablecoin, this is very valuable in all the other DeFi protocols. So imagine you want to have collateral for a perps DEX. You have a choice. You can put a stable coin in that does not accrue additional value, or you can put a stable coin in that can accrue additional value. It's desirable to use that stable coin that can accrue additional value regardless. The same goes with lending. If I'm borrowing if I'm borrowing dollars, it's quite nice to be able to go and get a yield on those dollars. So I think generally it just makes sense that there is a stable coin that has yield attached.
If you haven't heard that, then you're not listening to the right people and the right sources, because that has already begun, and it's what's going to take basically crypto mainstream. There's some number go up people. That's the term I'm going to use, because everyone wants the prices to go up of the assets they own. But the number go up people don't care about anything else, and they just want to see number go up. They don't care. They're oblivious. They're intellectual lazy. They just don't care. They don't want to read about anything. They don't want to understand anything. They just want the number to go up. It's going to be a difficult road ahead, a very difficult road, because you're involved in something more that you got involved in. The number might go up, but we are participants and able to participate in understanding the risks, understanding the opportunities, and then being able to take advantage of those as more opportunities come along. So it's more than just like flare to the moon. FLR is not going to go to the moon during the middle of a distribution, and the ecosystem hasn't even launched yet. The launching of FAssets is the start of the economic machine that will power the Flare network.
I think a lot of what's going to happen is going to be around creating an economy around the FAssets. I think if you look at, say, the FAsset system, right, there's going to be, the FAsset system is not static. You don't just bang in collateral and then it just stays there forever. Your collateral is either going to be, increasing in value against your position, the issued FAssets, or decreasing in value against the issued FAssets. This means you have to have an economy, means you have to have DEXs, means you have to, as an agent, you can either be withdrawing excess collateral, or you'll need to be topping up when your collateral gets too low. This then drives DEX trading. DEX trading then incentivizes participants from other chains to come because suddenly there's a lot of activity. So, the engine for, I think, a lot of what's going to happen is going to be around creating an economy around the FAssets.
So once you could understand this concept that, these things are different than maybe when I first got into crypto, and that's to be expected. I mean, everyone knew, like, oh, there's going to be innovations that we can't even fathom. Well, in 2020, DeFi summer came along and just took the market by storm. The last bull run was fueled by DeFi. And this cycles of ups and downs and high volatility is going to come to an end, but there's dystopian belief in some XRP community that something's going to become magically stable and high priced. Yeah, that's another pipe dream. So understanding the reality of that these assets still are based on supply and demand. So what drives the demand? If there's less supply and more demand, the price goes up. So yes, there can be institutional fundamental value analysis and all that stuff because they're more attractive as an investment. But TVL, and even in Susan Athey's paper, which was said numerous times, but was ignored by almost everyone I ever heard talk about it, is that the predominant long-term driver of value is storage demand, and using assets as collateral, using assets as liquidity drives storage demand. Do you know what doesn't drive storage demand? And some people are going to be surprised by this. A bridge asset is not storage demand. So that's a surprise to some people. Don't confuse Ripple's marketing with XRP price going up. Bridge asset doesn't mean value go up. XRP native protocols mean XRP price going up because it's used as collateral, it's used as liquidity, it's in demand. It's not the transactional volume. That's just a mechanism that drives that. Now, going forward on Flare, you have multiple different ways that FLR is locked up, but you have this one core native feature that makes it very powerful. And why is that? By locking up Flare in the collateral pools for every FAsset that's minted, the agent plus the community collateral pool, which you could kind of consider like an insurance pool, because it's the last line of defense after the agent stablecoin, the agent's collateral pool, and then the community collateral pool, which I'm not going to go in detail now on, but just know, same concept. You deposit FLR as collateral, you get what? A claim token called Collateral Pool token. And that will have certain unique features that you're going to have to understand that are pretty complex. So the beta is absolutely necessary for not just testing the system, but just to get everyone understanding the different dynamics of just the fact that there's two sides to the market, that you could be a minter and you could be a collateral provider, and they kind of go hand in hand in some capacity. But that's TVL. So the more minting of FAsets, the more FLR that has to be locked. There's no choice. So that's a metric that these networks have comparable analysis. So you can compare the TVL on this network versus that. All the revenue generated by the FAsset system, if it's going to the agents or the collateral providers, that can be all summed up and then measured as in network revenue.
The base blockchain is then used to create and deploy services that will generate, hopefully, revenue once they are deployed on the blockchain in question. So those services can be numerous. So when it comes to decentralized finance, what we have found is this is probably the one that lends itself most directly to using traditional financial models to value these usages. You can use comparable analysis, which any equity analyst would be very familiar with, using metrics like price to assets, price to fees, or even price to total value locked. The interesting aspect with decentralized finance is that when you come to think of it, this is the closest to traditional application of financial services, right? So these flows, they serve a commercial purpose. in rendering a service in exchange for a payment. Well, these transactions and these flows can be measured and discounted into a value or compared to other services using comparable analysis in order to determine if one is more or less cheap as compared to the other. When you come to think of it, decentralized finance is probably where most of the, I would say, commercial interest behind digital finance will be developed over time, I would say.
And the point of the relayer and the collateral pool is that it's earning outside assets. So when you deposit FLR as collateral, you're earning FXRP, FBTC. That is unheard of, to be able to earn blue chip cryptos. I know it's not the native version, but you could just redeem it for the native version if you wanted to. But it's a one-to-one. It's a better version in many ways, because it's going to be able to be used then to on Flare, and it could be used, for example, not financial advice, to borrow USDX and take USDX and put that in the T pool and earn 8%. And now you're earning yield. Or you could borrow USDX to swap into another asset and then make sure your yield, your debt is denominated in USD. So there's many different strategies, but having a lending and borrowing protocol next to the collateral system is crucial. That's why Kinetic is so important, because they provide a battle-tested, robust, just conservative money market, a borrowing side, a lending side. You turn into a borrower and you're a lender. You're a lender one day and you borrow the next day. You just click the switch and now you're borrowing. So there'll be reasons why this will come up, and you can't even come up with a strategy quite yet, because we don't have all the pieces quite yet there. But you should start thinking about it. And how can you think about it if you don't understand all these pieces? And this is, I'm going to be honest, it's complicated. This is the bleeding edge. If you want to be a power user, then this is for those people. This channel is not for everybody. But if you are on the ground floor of Flare and you have the opportunity and spend all this time and all this effort, you might as well learn. There's nobody who has more information than you. You have the same access. And these are community-driven networks. XRP, Flare, they will always be. They'll have an institutional focus too. And merging those together is really where you'll get that massive growth, just like the internet did. The internet had enormous growth when the two came together. And that's what's trying to be done on both. But it starts with grassroots, because it's open, permissionless, and accessible to all. So USDX is the stability that's needed on the Flare network with the flexibility that you want, because it's never locked. Its yield is paid out in two assets, FLR and USDX, every block. And you could see it on the actual ClearPool DApp. And developed by HT Digital Assets, Hex Trust's tokenization ecosystem, USDX will provide a vital DeFi primitive on Flare, with the backing maintained at a steadfast 1-to-1 ratio against the US dollar or equivalently valued assets. These reserves, which primarily consist of 1 to 3 month T-bills, are securely held by regulated Tier 1 financial institutions, ensuring that the holders can place their trust in the value and resilience of the stablecoin.
This is the first product that we've started as HT Digital Assets, which is the tokenization platform of Hex Trust. And there's a reason that we chose Flare as the first place to start. You know, we view them as a key partner. We've had past collaborations with ClearPool as well. And really, HT Digital Assets, we're looking to really start proper tokenization of real world assets in all shapes and forms, right? And, you know, the deployment of FAssets on Flare, you know, we're very, very optimistic on. So really, I think, as Jacob said, this is just the beginning of the relationship. There's going to be much more to come.
So cUSDX is the equivalent of a liquidity provider token, but it represents a one-to-one value of your deposited USDX. So unlike an AMM, where it's an LP token represents two assets, this is a very simple one-to-one. One cUSDX equals one USDX because the value accrues separately. Now, this is not always the case for these type of designs. Just, I'm going to say briefly, and I'll do a separate video on it, but the liquid staked Flare, the value accrues very differently, and it accrues within the value of the S Flare, including the Flare drops. So that is different than this, where this, the yield is accrued separately. There's benefits and trade-offs for both designs, and I think this is just easier to manage as a collateral since they're the same one-to-one. If you think about it, if the agents have to use cUSDX as collateral, you want it as $1, not as like 108 or 107, and it's going up after 8 months, 9 months. They could turn around, take that USDX, and go mint more cUSDX every time it accrues. But from not financial advice or tax advice, you're not liable for anything until you claim. Once you claim, you could wait till the end of the year and then claim in January if you like. Nobody's stopping you. So until you claim the assets, just like an LP token, there's a lot of people who think that, once I deposit my assets in a liquidity pool, I'm liable for the fees. No, you're not. There was a video recently made on that. That was a blatant contradiction to David Schwartz's comments at Apex 2022. When you deposit USDX on ClearPool, you not only earn yield on your USDX, but you also receive additional rewards in the form of FLR tokens. Users can claim USDX and FLR rewards anytime without withdrawing their initial staked USDX. So Flare rewards. These are coming from the foundation, and this is the native token, obviously, of the Flare network. And as soon as it accrues, it can be used to secure the network through staking and support the provision of decentralized data by delegating to the FTSOs and participate in governance and pay for transaction fees, and also be used in any dApps and specifically the collateral pools of each agent. So you'll be able to choose which agent you want to provide FLR to and as collateral. And you don't have to, but that's a use case that's going to demand FLR from people minting FAssets. And if you listen to what Hugo said earlier, the fact that this collateral of the stablecoin has yield makes the whole system more capital efficient, and therefore it will drive down the fees that will be charged for minting the FAssets, because the agents are providing a service, providing collateral in a trustless way, that you're always guaranteed to get your assets back due to the design of the system and the multiple collaterals, including the state connector, which can attest to the underlying assets on the native chain. And this will attract more providers of collateral. Like if you think of all the institutional and VC entities who are looking for yield in DeFi, well, if you hold USDC or USDT, there's no yield. Like you have to really, to get 8%, you have to really extend yourself into some interesting higher risk situation. So from a risk adjusted perspective, it is by far the best. Now, yes, are there higher yielding stablecoins like Athena? Yes, but are they backed by real world assets that are guaranteed by the US government and the most liquid market in the world? No. Is there some aspect of trust with Hex Trust being the issuer? Yes. But that's a given for any of these assets that are issued with real world assets. And until we have natively issued collateral like securities and other assets that are natively issued on the blockchains, it's going to be, and even certain aspects of funds and other types of things can be issued natively. They don't have to be just tokenized. We will see other ways and innovative ways to create stablecoins. There will be a continuous, and there is. And a lot of people thought, oh, when Terra Luna collapsed, that's the end on decentralized stablecoins. That is the one of the holy grails, and it will continue. But to even create a decentralized stablecoin, this is necessary first because it provides that like foundational peg, and it provides the foundational building block to establish a DeFi ecosystem that can support all the dApps. It's critical in almost every application, from trading. Well, you want to trade against US dollars because everything's priced in US dollars. If you want to borrow and lend, it's something you're going to want to borrow because it's priced in US dollars. Now, is there a demand for other currencies, stablecoins? I think there will be some, but the fact that the US government, this is beneficial for them, that there's demand for treasuries now. And the entities that it's issued to are whitelisted, they're KYC'd, but once the asset's out there, it's out there. So in a way, it has some decentralized aspects to it. And some might say, well, the US government's never going to allow that to last for long. I'm like, well, they kind of haven't done anything. And it does really benefit the US in the sense that it keeps the hold on the reserve currency status versus, things like CBDCs, which are still theoretical. And a lot of people don't talk about it, but the C and CBDC is going to turn into commercial bank when all is said and done, because there is a limit on how much can be created in stablecoins in this way. Now, the more assets that are brought on chain, I think, open up new innovative ways to create different types of collateral. And the more on-chain aspect of everything, the more secure it is, the more transparency, and the less trust that needs to be extended. And that's really what tokenization is going to bring. And that's going to lead to, if they could digitally issue it, like stocks. There's no reason why we need a paper stock or electronic stock, and then to just tokenize it on chain, just put it on chain to begin with. And same with private equity. It's going to go that way. But land, you can't tokenize You can't digitally issue physical land, but you can digitally issue debt or a mortgage on a blockchain. So those are things that can be very interesting. And the debt and credit markets, a lot of people have this aspect, oh, credit is bad and debt, but credit makes the world go round. Just because the U.S. has abused the privilege or the absorbent privilege doesn't mean that credit isn't of super importance. The crypto markets are desperate for credit. So things like ClearPool have C pools, which allow you to lend to private credit markets and whitelisted entities who pay higher yields looking for short-term funding to just cover their cash flows over the weekend or throughout the week. And USDX is going to be one of those assets that will be available to lend out. And another aspect of this three-way collaboration is that USDX chose the Flare network because they have this one, they're already an FTSO there. And that could be a home base with the bridging aspect to kind of get USDX distributed to other networks. And it has a use case. And a lot of these other yield-bearing stablecoins that are coming out, they don't have like a dedicated demanding use case. It's like, okay, comes out, you could put it here and we'll get treasury bills and you could earn this yield. But Flare and the FAssets system, the FAssets system is the epitome of a DeFi protocol. Like it's like the ultimate, but it's going to be governed ultimately by the Flare token holders. And it's going to be they used to call them in the beginning, white paper was a Spark dependent application. And the reason being is that it utilizes the FTSO as a critical component to manage the collateral liquidations. It's all built on chain. There's no outside trust of Chainlink or Pyth or anyone else. All the data that's needed is right there. Smart contracts could just liquidate. And the state connector has to attest to what's going on Bitcoin and what's going on the XRP ledger when those minters send their assets to the agent. And that's why FAssets is just for non-smart contract chains. And in 2024, there's not that many left. And the biggest two most important is XRP and BTC. And potentially Doge. Doge still has a major community as top 12. So I don't know if Garlinghouse wants to bash it all he wants. They have an established community. It has value, a lot of value. So it is what it is. Layer Cake will bridge over all the smart contract chains and assets. And it will also allow the FAssets to proliferate outward. So that's coming because 2024, Hugo has said, it is ship everything. And that is really what 2024 is about. This is when you only get one chance to launch this foundational economy. And Flare's put everything together to make it so it's going to be successful no matter what. Because it's got this FAsset system, which is capital efficient now. It went from being not that capital efficient or not as capital efficient because the stablecoin really was a drag because it's the safest collateral, and using that with FLR makes this whole system more secure, but it doesn't earn yield. And now they solved that problem in a big way and added a little bonus on top. So that's going to drive in collateral providers. There's no question that's going to get noticed because now it's like they could earn fees in XRP and BTC, and they can earn the trailing transaction fees, and they earn the yield on a stablecoin, they earn the yield on the FLR, and they'll be able to utilize some of the underlying asset to mint their own FAssets at a set, limit of how much they could use of the underlying asset. Otherwise, if they hold all 1-to-1 of the underlying asset, well, what's the point of the collateral then? So the point is to use some of the underlying, but it's not like it's going to get sold on exchanges. And that's another thing. None of this stuff right here has anything to do with a centralized exchange. Everything can be done from your decentralized non-custodial wallet, from your DEX. Forget the centralized exchanges. Just forget them. They are unnecessary. If you've been here a few years, there's less and less need for them. Unless you're like a super day trader or, for the time being, we're about to get a lot more on and off ramps in other ways, but those are a lot of the on and off ramps for the moment. But this is why we're not even going to see regulations on these exchanges, because by the time they put any regulation out on them, most of the trading is going to be on chain anyway. So that's where it's all headed. It's all headed that way because that's where it should have been from the beginning. And that's why Coinbase has built Base. Binance built Binance Smart Chain. You have Kraken building their layer 2. You have OKX has their own chain. Crypto.com has their own chain. KuCoin has their own chain. I mean, how many? It's like almost every one. For the most part, the days of those exchanges, centralized exchanges, there'll probably be a few big ones left, but it fragments liquidity and has caused these hype cycles, and the heavy rise up of all the assets and rise down is because there's so much fragmentation of liquidity between the centralized exchanges and even the DEXs, because there's 20 DEXs on each blockchain, all with the same pair, and that fragments liquidity even more. So this is why the AMM on the XRPL is going to be the super DEX for the whole ecosystem surrounding it. And that's a whole nother video. But understand that these stable coins, even if you have no interest in it right now, you want the price to go up of FLR, XRP, whatever it is. Fine. But one day when that price does go up, this is the new financial system. Not the central banks, not what the BIS is creating in their propaganda and all that crap. They could tell you whatever they want to tell you. This is happening. This is real stuff and real value being transacted. Now, yes, there'll be a convergence, but this is real. So having value in these stable coins is of thought, I think. Not financial advice, but there's a reason why the market is predicted to go from 160 trillion to over 3 trillion by 2028. That's almost a 20x. That's absurd. So why such a large jump? Well, one reason I will say is to settle regulated assets. No, XRP will not be a settlement asset for regulated securities. That's another person who made the second video. I'm not going to name their name, but it was just like back-to-back videos of massive misinformation. No, XRP will not do that. Don't take Monica Long's comments out of context, and do some research and be careful who you listen to. I'm Mickey B. Fresh, and I've been supporting Flare, covering Flare for over 3.5 years now. And I run infrastructure on Flare, FTSO validator. Why? Because I believe in what they're building, and I've understood it, as it's evolved over the years. But, when I did that interview with Brad Kimes back in fall of 2020, I remember interviewing Hugo and then speaking to him and just understanding their vision. It just took a while, but what has come out of this has been so many things, but ultimately it's always been about these data provision protocols, which allow for this FAsset collateral system, allows for the relayer, allows for a plethora of other applications and layer cake to bridge smart contracts. So we need to bridge value onto Flare. And it's going to take time to get all these things rolled out. The FAsset system has to be 100% robust and secured before it's proposed as governance on Flare. That may take some time. So we're going to have to be patient. It could go faster. It could not be. But I like the idea of an incentivized testnet. It has proven to work on Ethereum layer 2s. So, I don't expect to get rich off an airdrop from incentivized testnet, but it's just a little something extra to get. You could get the real volume on the testnet because people aren't putting real value at stake, but they're incentivized to pretend like a game. And in that way, it really stresses the system. And I think it's good. And everyone gets to learn the roles and the interface. I mean, the interface is probably the single most important thing. And what's great is Flare built the interface. So it's going to be pretty sweet, I think. But just once again, remember, Bifrost, mobile wallet, signs and authorizes transactions and access to your account. The dApps are external. And the wallet has a browser in it where you could put the dApp URL because it's a website. And there could be 5 different front ends to the same dApp. That's why they're open source smart contracts like Uniswap. There's 100, there might be 1,000 different interfaces into, one dApp built by 1,000 different people. So this is why there'll always be decentralized applications. And especially with the FAsset system, there's no regulations getting implemented. The only thing that could be is certain agents may require certain entities from certain jurisdictions to KYC, but there'll be many agents to choose from, and there'll be many agents who will not be required to do anything. And that's what's the beauty of truly building a decentralized system that's governed with parameters that are overseen by the Flare token holders. It's not like we're micromanaging every second and manually. It's over if we need to make a change to a collateral ratio, or there's some analysis done that the system needs to be added this feature, and we'll see things. There's companies out there like Gauntlet that do risk assessments on these protocols after they're in the wild, and you see a lot of value being deployed on them. So that's something to look for in the future going forward. And the phase 2 of the FAsset beta should be launching soon. And the reason why we can't participate in phase 1 is because the interface comes in phase 2. And that should be out very soon. So exciting times ahead. I'm Mickey B. Fresh, and I'm out.
And so Flare's tokens used really for 2 things. And we have an internal and we have an external economy. So the internal economy is what I said, is that's FTSO staking and the stake connector. And this is rewarded in either Flare or Songbird, depending on which network you're in. If you want to think about that, that is a reapportionment of value from people that are either too lazy to stake or are staking badly. And that flows to people who are staking well. So this is a redistribution of value internally. And really, if you want to think about why do we want to do that, it then allows, if you then hold those tokens, you can then earn value in the underlying tokens that are being bridged to Flare. So you earn fees in XRP, in Litecoin, in Stellar, in Algo. And so the participation over here is essentially the shuffling of the rights
to earn fees for bridging those tokens. And that's really the utility, like the economic utility of the token. So it's a bit like a global economy, whereby the internal economy dictates how much of a share of the total earnings from abroad you get.